Welcome back, guys. Or if you're new to my channel, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's the 2025 Toyota Rav4. It's America's best-selling compact crossover. This one specifically, though, it's an SE hybrid in a paint color that Toyota likes to call Silver Sky Metallic, which actually looks really good in person, even on an overcast day like today. But it's not perfect, so today I get to share the good, the bad, and the ugly of this extremely popular Toyota compact crossover to help you guys at home decide if this might be the right vehicle for you, so you can expect to see a walk around. All the specs, initial driving impressions, 0 to 60 on GPS, and then my final thoughts, and huge thanks to the Peterson Automotive Group for selling me this one. So today, let's dive right into the review of my Rav4 Hybrid. And if you like Toyota, the Rav4 Hybrid, or my video, please be so kind to consider liking my video. Basically, it lets me know you want to watch more stuff like this, and it even helps you by having YouTube choose to show you more stuff like this. Thank you so much. But if you're new to the Toyota Rav4, there's actually quite a lot that you guys should probably know. First of all, that nameplate came out with the first generation back in 1994, but it wasn't until 1996 that this came to the United States market. And ever since then, it's kind of been a slam dunk, kind of been a home run for Toyota. These are assembled all over the world, but for the North American or the United States market, the ones you're going to get come from the United States assembly plants, the Canadian plants, and the Japanese plants. This one specifically, the VIN number starts with a J, so it was assembled in its homeland country of Japan. And then they sell around 400,000 units a year in the United States, but about 2/3 of those are non-hybrids. Only about 1/3 of them are the hybrids. And globally, sales are usually over 1 million units. So there's millions of these around the world, but there's even a couple million of them in the United States. And a lot of automakers these days are kind of cutting back on how many models they have, which are how many vehicles, but they're increasing how many trim levels you have. So for a lot of the compact crossovers that compete against this, like the Mazda CX-5, the Honda CR-V, the Subaru Forester, and many others, there's a lot of trim levels. Like you might be able to have 5 to 12 trim levels. For instance, the Rav4, you can have a non-hybrid, you can have a hybrid, you can even have the most expensive of them all, a plug-in hybrid, which basically has a complete powertrain of each. So you can basically pay as much as you want, but if you do want a base trim level, like the base non-hybrid, that's going to start at about $29,000. And that's also before destination and delivery, so keep in mind there will be a little bit more pricing tacked onto that number you initially see online. And then the most expensive non-hybrid starts at about $37,000. Meanwhile, the hybrids are about a $3,000 premium across the board. This would start at about $32,000, or the most loaded out ones start at about $40,000. And a Prime, which is the plug-in hybrid, those are a little bit more. But mine is an SE hybrid, which is actually one of the higher trim levels. It starts at around $36,000. It has a couple $1,000s worth of options between the sunroof and power liftgate packages and the all-weather package, which basically just gives you a heated steering wheel and heated seats. But across the board, these are top safety picks. They do really well in crash tests. They are a 5-star crash test rated vehicle. They have really bright LED headlights and taillights, and Toyota's 2.5 safety sense, which overall is a pretty decent safety system. But when you do go with the SE hybrid like this, you also get a sport tuned suspension, which I don't know how much sportier it is compared to the non-sport tuned suspension, but hey, at least they painted the front shocks blue. That's kind of neat. It has blue stitching on the interior, an 8-inch screen, and a few other things that you'll see throughout this video. My example specifically also has the door edge guards, and it has the pulse system, which is where the third brake light flashes a couple times to alert the drivers behind you that, hey, you're stopping, and it's not just a static light, but it's a dynamic flashing light for a few seconds anyways. These are also really convenient to drive, and I've really been enjoying my time with it, especially driving around town, because like a lot of other compact crossovers, it's 15 feet long. The wheelbase is just under 9 feet. It's roughly 6 feet wide, about 5.5 feet tall. This one being a hybrid probably weighs about 3,700 pounds. If you have the Prime, it's going to weigh slightly more. If you have a non-hybrid, it's going to be up to a couple hundred pounds less. But the payload capacity on this one is 900 pounds, and that is not class leading. That is completely average for this class of vehicle. And then it has just over 8 inches of ground clearance, a 354 final drive ratio, and it does a full circle in about 36 feet. The last things to mention out here is the gas door is thankfully located on the driver's side, which is where I really like it just because of convenience. It's locking, so the dirty bums aren't going to attempt to siphon any of your 14.5 gallons of gas. This one specifically is rated for 41 in the city, 38 on the highway, which I will say in my week with it so far, I have been getting up to 44 in the city, and at interstate speed, which around here is 80 miles an hour, it does about 32. So I would imagine at highway speed around 60 or 65, yeah, it could probably get about the 38 rating. But I really think that the batteries just don't do a lot to help once you're up at speed and you're fighting a lot of wind and road resistance. And it has a square stance with all 4 tires being a 225 60/18. It is a Grand Trek PT20. They seem to have about 9/32 of tread depth. It is very much an economy on-road tire. I don't know that this is going to be very good in the snow and the ice, so I might personally change mine out before winter comes. But I do want to see how these handle, at least around town before that comes. The wheels look really good, but an 18-inch wheel is kind of big in my opinion. I don't think driving around paved roads like this, you're going to notice a bumpy or harsh ride. But personally, I just like having a little bit more sidewall and a little bit less wheel. But that's just my own preference. And then this is the key. You have lock, you have unlock, you have power liftgate on this example, and you have panic button. But you can leave it in your pocket because you do have proximity key features on the door handle. And then the door panel. It's all black materials. They could be a little bit more high-end, but honestly, for the price point of a vehicle like this one MSRP, I think about $39,000. It's honestly about what you would expect, but some vehicles do have a nicer door card. But this is a Toyota. It's going to last forever. There's not going to be any cracking. It's going to be easy to wipe down. There's not going to be a lot of scuffing. And I do like the big handle. I do wish the door pocket for my snacks was bigger, but it is okay. There's also nothing on the door sill. And then I do have the all-weather mats with this winter weathery package that it came with. It even comes up to the dead pedal. You have the gas door release right there. You have the hood release. You have the OBD2 port. You have the options that this one has. And then you have your old school garage door opener, because unlike my Subaru that I replaced with this, it doesn't have built-in garage door options. Otherwise, you have powered seats. They are heated. The blue stitching again. The bolstering is actually really comfortable for my build at 5'11". And then the power moonroof with some LED lights up top. And then sitting inside the Toyota Rav4, everything feels really nice. Like a lot of compact crossovers that sell in high volume, it's designed around the driver. It's only 6 feet wide, so it doesn't feel like the backpack or your passenger is very far away, and it's really easy to get to everything. I do wish we had the 6 o'clock position on the wheel, but it is leather wrapped, it is heated, and it actually gets super hot, but you really only notice it from the 9 and 3 in the periphery. You don't really notice it at all on the bottom and the top. The horn, very high pitched, kind of matches the name RAV4. And when we fired right up with the push button start, it's very quiet. Not a lot seems to happen. The wheel gets unlocked. The gauges come to life. You can see I've been getting 44.1 with still 500 miles of range. Pretty gosh darn impressive if you ask me. Visibility is not as good as some of the other crossovers, but honestly, it's fine. I recently drove a 6th gen Camaro and an H2 Hummer. Those things have awful visibility compared to this. So this is plenty good. And those side mirrors are actually really big. You can really see a lot off of them. And then the infotainment system. I currently have my phone disconnected, but Android Auto and Apple CarPlay is wireless. They're super easy to use. They pop up right away. I love that system. Probably the most that you're going to use on it is going to be the energy flow, if you ever think that that's cool. But you can also kind of go through some of that on the screen in the center. Like right here, we have a little bit of a battery charge, if you guys can see that. So that's pretty cool. Otherwise, you have physical HVAC, remember, or if you don't know, this has a heat pump, not a compressor like other cars. Traction control, heated seats, and plugins, a 12-volt big storage tray. The backup camera on this actually looks really good. And the cool thing is, and the trajectory lines do move, but the cool thing is when you go into park, the emergency brake automatically engages, which is really cool. You also have trail mode, eco to the left, sport to the right, normal in the center, or EV mode, to where if it allows you to and you have enough juice, you can drive in EV mode, which is pretty cool. Otherwise, really big center console and cup holders and everything just how you want it to be. Otherwise, mine doesn't really have anything up here. Otherwise, it just has the LED lights and it has the controls to slide and to tilt the sunroof with the SOS button right there. But with that said, let's turn it off and we'll hop in the back. Usually I'd hop in the back of the driver's side, but today we are gonna do the passenger side because the driver's side is kind of occupied over there. Otherwise, the doors on this do not open as far as the doors on some of the other crossovers, but they still open big enough, obviously, or Toyota would have fixed that. When the seat's down, it is inclined just a little bit. but they're pretty easy to lift and engage to latch because they are cloth, so they're not overly heavy. And then sitting in the back behind the passenger seat, I have pretty good room in front of my knees. Big center seat, ventilation, plugins, map pocket, but you don't get that on the driver's side. And otherwise, pretty good visibility, and it's easy to reach back and access the back if you need to. And then you even have an LED light up here. But with that said, let's hop out and I'll show you the hatch. Back here, I actually really like how Toyota designed this RAV4. It was refreshed a couple years ago. That mostly affected the front end. But the back, it's more squared off than these have ever been. And I think adding to why so many of them are now sold, I think more guys are kind of getting into the RAV4, especially if you don't want to pay for 4Runner prices, or you're not going to take this off-road like 4Runners are actually designed for. But anyways, without breaking a window, there's about 4 ways to access the hatch. You can either push the button that's on the dashboard, climb through the back seats, push the button that's underneath the Toyota emblem, or just do the laziest of all and use the power liftgate. You paid for it, you might as well use it. I do have a crate back here with some jumper cables, some oil, some basic things that I carry in the back of my daily driver. But back here you have about 37 cubic feet of room. And if you drop the seats, you have about 70. 70 is not class leading, but it is on the better end of things. For reference, a CX-50 only has 56 cubic feet, or a Forester has low 70s. So it is pretty good when the seats are down, but 37 feet when the seats are up is just about class leading. You do have a very narrow bumper. You're not gonna have to lift it super high or lift items very far to get them in. And before you guys comment, I don't know what is going on the mat. I think that's the rubber quality. I think that's something from the manufacturer, but this is the way it came, and personally it didn't bother me. So with that said, let's lower it down and we'll come around to the front. If you're the lucky duck that gets to ride shotgun, you'll notice you also have proximity key features there. You have turn signals on the mirror and you have blind spot monitoring as well. But when you open up the door panel looks about the same as the front. You don't have the power controls, at least on my example. My backpack though doesn't seem to mind, so we'll just leave that topic alone. You don't really have any storage on the side of the transmission tunnel, but you do have storage above it, which I really appreciate. And then there's a key hidden in your remote, so you can lock the glove box. Otherwise, it's big enough for your papers and your pamphlets. So with that said, let's come around to the front. I'm gonna pop the hood and I'll show you what the A25A engine looks like and what the hybrid system looks like, and we'll talk about it. Under the hood is the engine code A25A to represent this 2.5 liter engine, which is in many of Toyota's current hybrid systems. It makes 219 combined horsepower, although the engine on its own probably makes about 200, just like in the non-hybrids. And somehow it only makes a peak 163 pound-feet of torque, but it's an extremely flat torque curve. I think the torque hits you right off of idle, so it actually feels quite punchy, as you'll see on the 0 to 60. But the engine is actually pretty simple. The air filter, the induction side, and the manifold up there, the exhaust manifold on the back. That means that the 4 cylinders run like this transversely, and you'd expect to see an alternator, a starter, a serpentine belt, all those things, the AC compressor on the side, and there actually is not. This hybrid system eliminates all of that junk, and instead of the AC compressor, it does have a heat pump, kind of like EVs for how they give you heat. And overall, that's a pretty powerful power plant for what it is, and for being as efficient as it is. The eCVT really shouldn't be called a CVT because it has stationary or like planetary, like physical fixed gears. It doesn't have belts and chains, and they're basically bulletproof. It might be Toyota's most reliable transmission right now, which is kind of crazy to say. Otherwise, you have hybrid components back here, and I forgot to show you, but under the plastic in the back by the spare tire, you have the battery. Anyways, let's drop the hood and take it for a drive. Well, I wasn't going to start the driving impressions right here, but I'm going uphill and it is doing this completely in battery mode. For how much longer, I'm not entirely sure, but I've driven this vehicle almost 500 miles now, so there's enough that I can share with you guys that will be beneficial and I think hopefully worth your time just in this quick driving impressions to get out of this giant crater in the ground that I'm currently in. Okay, so the engine just kicked in and now you guys can see that on the screen. Overall, let me just say the visibility in this vehicle is pretty good. It's good enough, it's as good as you need. The mirrors do a great job. Being only about 15 feet long, you really have a pretty decent sense of where your vehicle stops, but the more time you spend with it, the more you'll get familiar with that. Also, because of this being a Toyota, it doesn't really feel like you sit on top of the vehicle, like as if you're a Mario Kart character. This feels like you're sunken in. The dashboard is higher than it is on some other vehicles. The screen doesn't impede my vision, but you guys can see that the dashboard goes higher than the screen from my point of view, which is basically exactly what the camera is that I'm wearing. Overall, it's comfortable. It's easy to find a nice position. If you do have a child safety seat in the back though, if it's a big one like a hybrid stroller or something, you might need your seat further forward than you want, especially if you are, I'd say, probably 5'9" or higher. I'm 5'11", I weigh like 190-ish. And I sometimes have to have the seat a little bit further than I want, but right now it's kind of a happy medium. These seats are comfortable. They don't get as hot though as Mazda seats, but they get at least as hot or hotter than Subaru seats, which I compare those vehicles because I have so much time driving them. I've driven another half dozen crossovers, but those are the ones that I drive the most often. And so overall, there's really a lot to like about this. The LED headlights at night, they do a good job. They light up your path quite well. They're pretty comparable to the LEDs of the other companies, and because that's now standard on these cars, they can be a top safety pick, which I'm really glad Toyota went that way. And getting up to speed in these is really no problem. Even at altitude, even where I'm at maybe 4,000 feet above sea level, there is a lot to like about this vehicle. And let me switch over to the MPG. Even after doing that steep climb, I'm still getting over 40 miles per gallon. So it is just amazing what the hybrid technology in these can do. While being extremely reliable, it's also really efficient. The brakes work well, everything feels linear, nothing's really surprising about this. Kind of like mentioned before, there's no gimmicks, it's just a straightforward vehicle, and it does everything that you need it to do quite well. So there really aren't going to be any surprises when you buy this specific Toyota model. But let's get to the private road and we'll do a 0 to 60. 0 to 60 in my RAV4, you'll notice the gauges are now red. That indicates we're in sport mode. Traction is off, density altitude's 4,000 feet, so the gas-powered portion of this is down on power, probably about 10%. Let's see what it can do. Slight brake rev, a little bit of wheel spin. Actually sounded very good just now. True 0 to 60, ooh, came in at 8.19, probably because of the wheel spin. It is wet outside, so we'll do this test again at another time. But know that it's anywhere from 7.5 to low 8s at my altitude. My final thoughts on the 2019 to 2025 Toyota RAV4, specifically this hybrid, specifically my hybrid. So I really like these. I think they are one of the last really reliable vehicles. Sure, it's not a big tough body on frame SUV like a Sequoia or a 4Runner, but it's also not going to be more expensive than the average annual income. This is a reasonable vehicle for reasonable people, especially small families or those who like to be a little bit adventurous, who like to pack some stuff with them, but they don't like to move the whole house every time they go for a drive. This is a reasonable vehicle. It handles well. It gets phenomenal gas mileage. It's actually pretty quick. It's really fun to drive, and I like it a lot. But ultimately, these are just my opinions. And these are some of the reasons why I decided to purchase one of these, so that over the next few years I could test it out, make a couple dozen videos to share with you guys on how well I think it does compared to other vehicles, because there's no way to really get to know a vehicle, to really know it well, without owning it and driving it every day. And with this being the most popular vehicle basically in the world, it was time to give it a chance. It was time to give it a more than just a test drive, because I want to share that with you guys. But anyways, what are your thoughts? What are your opinions? Like this video if you got anything helpful out of it. Subscribe if you haven't and you want to watch more. And comment those thoughts below. Until next time, guys, I wish you the best. I hope you take care. Be safe out there. See ya.